got a pretty good frost on my windshield. I wanted to come back on here for anyone who listened to my YouTube video that I made yesterday about lying, and it kind of turned into a different. I started out talking about liars and narcissists and lying and how they just, it's all they know. And I got started talking about how, as a victim of a narcissist, there will come a day when you figure out that you are not the only one, and that while you feel so victimized and you feel so put upon or like abused, you realize that they do that to everybody. And it's not giving them an excuse. It's not saying, well, that's just how they are. But for a long time, I had this resentment toward this woman who came before me because I felt like she attacked me. But I didn't have the facts, until much later. I figured out that he had lied to her the whole time and lied about me and smeared me to her the same way he smeared her to me and the same way he smears everybody to everybody else. Because that's just what narcissists do, Let me try to roll my window down and get some of the frost off of it so I can see where I'm going to go on here. I'll try to turn without hitting anything. I can't see nothing right now, but I'm in my own yard. I guess if I hit anything, I'll just pay for it myself. I don't know. I'm telling you, I am completely frosted over. I'm just going to sit right here for a couple of minutes. I'm getting vertigo because I can't see where I'm going or anything. Okay. Let me pull up here. Get pulled around here where the sun comes in on the front side. But anyway, let me just say, when I was talking about this woman, this ex of his that was in his life before me, she had this reputation, and I didn't know her, but what I knew about her was just what he had told me. And when you're being love bombed and groomed by a narcissist, you pretty much believe everything that they say. It's a kind of a form of mind control in a way of like, what is it called? Like cult. Like when you believe the cult leader, you believe everything they say. And so I just thought this woman was so bad, that she treated him so bad and made his life so miserable, and because that's what he told me, And then after she came and started like kind of bad-mouthing me and going to my friends and asking questions about me and stuff, I started asking about her. And people that knew her, people who had worked with her, people who had known her in the community, they just all pretty much said, she's just this kind of B word, she's just a hateful kind of person. She's got a sour turn. She never has anything nice to say to anybody. And that wasn't just coming from him. And when other people started telling me that, I thought, well, he probably was telling me the truth about her, So when I was talking about that yesterday, it occurred to me that probably a lot of the reason that she acted that way and behaved that way was because of him, she may have had a natural kind of personality that was kind of, gruff, or just somebody who just did not have a friendly personality, but then add to it years and years of dealing with and living with a cheating partner, someone who you had children with and who you were trying to have a life with, and the lies of a narcissist and the way he probably treated her behind closed doors, I don't know. But I would suspect now, knowing what I do and looking back at my time with him, that she was with him for a much, much longer time. And she probably hid a whole lot from her family. Because I'll tell you something, just like with any other narcissist, Now, for those of you who are come over from Facebook, when you hear about CMC and Ed, and you know that Ed's family doesn't really have anything to do with her, doesn't really care for her, that's the way it was with him and her family. This ex's family didn't like him at all and wasn't really, even his own family. This was told to me by a friend of mine who was actually like married into his cousins, was just kind of like a cousin type in-law. And this friend told me, none of his family really has much to do with him. Said something to him or about him or whatever, But I wanted to just kind of step back to that story just a little bit and say this is probably one of the reasons why this woman had this attitude and this, behaved the way that she did toward people, because she was probably carrying around so much rage inside of her from having to deal with him. And because they did have kids together, and I don't know whatever the reason was that she chose to keep taking him back every time that he would do this to her, I'm sure that her family saw it happen time and time again, and they probably just kind of stayed quiet about it. Because just like with anybody else who's trying to bring awareness about a narcissist to somebody, they know that eventually, if you continue to try to pound into that person's head, that they're going to turn their back on you. So in order for her family to stay close to her, they probably just kept quiet about it and accepted her relationship with him, and dealt with him the best way that they could. It was probably from a distance. And so I just wanted to kind of go back, because when I went back and re-listened to that video after I had posted it on YouTube, I thought, it dawned on me, yeah, that's the reason why she is acting better now, because she's been away from this man for enough years now that it's finally occurred to her. It was probably 3 years after discard for me to finally wake up and realize what he was, and maybe she's finally started to realize that. She's finally there, at least let's hope. As for the woman who came after me and after her, and after he went back and forth for several years, and here's another kind of a thing that some people are ashamed to talk about, but it's true, and this happened to me. And when it happened to me, I looked it up, and I went to YouTube and I typed it in, and there was this whole world of people talking about it. It's when you find out. See, when he went back to her, I was still under the, I did not know about him being a narcissist. That had not occurred to me yet. So when he went back to her and it ended between me and him, he used the children. Well, I have to do what's best for my kids. And it made me feel guilty. Like if I tried to keep him for myself, I was taking him away from his kids. And so I allowed him to use that excuse. But I never felt any kind of like jealousy or anything toward her, the woman he went back to, because I convinced myself, and I allowed him to convince me, that he didn't have any love for her, which he didn't. He never could have loved her. But in my mind, I was telling myself he's only with her because of his kids and because of the fact that she's going to throw him under the bus and try to take his money and his home and all this stuff. I was kind of like still on his side, And while I didn't have any contact with him, I didn't feel any kind of jealousy or anything toward him being with her. Now, later on, when I found out that he had left her for someone else, I did. And, I mean, it had been several years at that point, and I was just like, why am I feeling this way? Why am I feeling like, and what you feel is, why her? Why couldn't he have been happy with me? Why did he leave me and go back to the situation that he swore to me was horrible, and how horrible he was treated, and how they didn't love each other, they didn't have anything in common, they never slept together, and just all this horrible smear that he told me about her and about their relationship. And I felt like, why did he go back? And then he couldn't have just worked it with me and I didn't mean enough to him for him to stand up to her. So then he meets this new woman, or I believe she was already in the picture, but anyway, he's with her now, and you feel like, why not me? Even though you don't want to go back to that abuse or to any of that, but you can't help but feel that way because you're a human being. And you feel like, what does this person have that I didn't have? What did they give him that I couldn't give him? Why did he leave? But here's something that my rational mind, my healed mind, looked at it from the viewpoint of the narcissism in him, and I realized that he stayed with the mother until his kids were all out of the house and all grown, and at the point that the youngest child was old enough to, he no longer had a financial obligation, he left. And he had always told me that that was what he was going to do. And I would just always say, yeah, right, And right before this, and I've talked about this in my videos, in my playlists, not long before, he was still he started back contacting me. He started hovering me. Instead of it just being like, hey, how are you? What you been up to? What's, just trying to be friendly. He started back, I miss you. I wish we could have worked things out. I wonder about us. What might have been? And saying things like, I've been thinking about you in a way of like, maybe we could try again. And I just told him, no. I'm happy now. I'm with somebody else. I'm not interested. Whatever is in the past is in the past. And about a month and a half later, I find out he is married. He gets married to this other woman. And I, of course, felt jealousy because he had rekindled these thoughts in me of like, well, remember how good it was in the beginning. Even though I knew he was a narcissist, and I knew that I didn't want to live that way. You can't help it. It's a brain injury. It's post-traumatic brain injury. So I Googled it and I typed it into YouTube, and I've seen all these other people that admitted that they felt the same way when they found out that the ex-narcissist was now happy with somebody else. But keep in mind, that word happy, no, they're not happy. They're never happy. Just like CMC is not happy with Ed. I've said this from day one. You can go back through the videos. Anytime AKD was in the picture, CMC was ready to leave Ed. Whether it was a love toward AKD in that way, that she wanted to explore that new world or whatever, or whether it was just that here's somebody that's come to save me. Here's somebody that's come to get me out of this. Because they have no loyalty. She would pick up everything she's got right now and walk out of that house into somebody else's house right now if they offered her whatever she wants. And she said it herself on the video the other night. Duh. When she said Ed says that she cares more about her supporters than she does him. And she went, well, duh. That's like saying, of course I care more about them than I do you. Because he probably doesn't give her money, and they do, CMC she would go off to be with anybody else. A narcissist, they don't have any loyalty. So, back to my story, what I was talking about before, I did feel those pangs of jealousy in the beginning when I found out about him being with somebody new. Because, like I had said, the whole time he was back with the other woman, the mother of his kids, I never felt that way. Because I had allowed myself to believe his lies, that he had no feelings for her, and that he was only going back for the kids. And I do believe that part of it was true to a certain point. But I also believe that she had found her voice and had started to stand up to him. And he didn't like it. He didn't like it because he wasn't used to it, you know. He was used to being able to control her and keep her doing and acting the way he wanted. And when he saw that she'd been away from him long enough that she was starting to stand up for herself, he had to go back. He had to control that. And probably also because he really couldn't control me as much as he thought, because I questioned him. When it got to a point that I started picking up on things that were not kosher or whatever, I would question him, and he would scramble for an answer, and I would call him out on the lies. And it just got to the point, I believe, that he thought, well, you know, she's not going to be the servant or the victim that I thought she was going to be. But had I stayed and had I kept my mouth shut and just let him treat me anyway, I probably would still be there, you know. And I'm glad I'm not. I really am. But I did go through that period of time where I felt jealousy toward this new woman. But now, she's had her come to Jesus moment, you know. They're no longer together. They've divorced. She divorced him. And things that I've heard, and I know, like I was saying earlier, we're not supposed to look at that stuff. We're not supposed to be curious about it. We're not supposed to care what they're doing or how they've treated others. But human nature is curiosity, and sometimes when you have mutual friends on social media with these people, your curiosity gets the better of you. At least mine does, and I admit that freely. And I have gone to her page, and she has talked about how he basically robbed her. And I don't know about financially, but took things from the home that was purchased when after they married. So I guess he felt like they were his. And how she was having to replace things that he had taken. And just, you know, little childlike things. Told y'all, for those of you who've been listening to me for a while, I told y'all the story about the dog. And how the dog went missing twice after the two of them got together. This was a dog that she had had for 6 or 7 years. And it went missing after they'd been together for a while. And then someone found it, or it came back. And then it went missing again. And I told y'all, the second time that dog went missing, I just knew in my heart. And I just said, I made a video about it. And I said, he's done something to that dog. Because he didn't hate dogs. He had his own dogs. But he didn't want nobody else to have a dog. He didn't want me to keep my dog. And I told him to kiss my eyes. It's with her, is that he lived in her home. So her dog was already there before he was. And he had to get rid of that dog. I fully believe it. I believe it right now to this day. That he wanted rid of that dog because he didn't want her to have any kind of attachment to anything but him. And as I learned later, what I was told, and for about a year, the child had nothing to do, but none of her children had anything to do with her because they didn't want to be around him, you know? And she talked about that openly on her social media after the breakup, because she said she was blinded to it for so long because she believed everything he told her. And I believe that. I believe that because, let's face it, that's what narcissists do. They want to divide you and keep you from anybody. They don't want you to have any friends. They don't want you to have family who love you, just like the one I was talking about before me. He didn't want her going around her family. He didn't go around them. He didn't want them coming to his house. And they didn't want to be around him anyway. So that kept them away from her. And that's what narcissists do. They don't want you to have anybody but them to rely on. They don't want you to have anybody to make you happy or to maybe open your eyes up, you know. That's the reason why CMC blocks so many people, deletes their comments, and makes light of the fact that she got indicted for a felony for flagrant non-support. And yes, it is re-election time in Breathitt County, Kentucky. And I said this way back. The reason that I believe that they're going after her now is because it's re-election time. And because the awareness people have brought the attention to the courts that they're all onto it. You know what I mean? They've contacted the courts so much and said, here, we know about her owing all this money. Why is she not being held accountable? Why is she allowed to scam and cheat people? Why is she allowed to use drugs live on Facebook and nothing happens? Why is she allowed to drive around the county without a driver's license? And nothing is done to her. You know? And I think that they saw that so many people were aware of it, and they started thinking, well, we're going to have to start campaigning for office, and a lot of people might bring this up, so let's do something. Let's put on a show. Now, whether they do anything to her or not is yet to be seen. The grand jury has indicted her. I see it with my own two eyes. But anyway, I didn't mean for this video to go so long. I just kind of wanted to come back and just give a little bit of an update to yesterday's video. I do believe the reason that this woman had that attitude is because of what she carried from him. The woman after me, this ex-wife now, is starting to come to Jesus, and she's realizing what he was and how she fell for it. The only thing I ever had, the only kind of like thoughts I ever had about her, and maybe she just hasn't gotten there yet to self-admit, because we all have to eventually. We all have to admit our faults and our wrongdoing, and that maybe we kind of overlooked some stuff on purpose. For a long time, we will deny. We'll live in denial that we knew anything, or that we were maybe like questioning. But I think she's getting to the point now that she's starting to realize that she has to admit to herself that maybe she knew some things that she wouldn't admit publicly, because I know that he was still living with the other woman when he up and left, because he was contacting me, and I was telling him, because when he first started contacting me, he first started hoovering me, like a year after discard, he tried to play that like, well, we're not together anymore. I was talking about now, I got so distracted by these people over here. But what it boils down to is he was telling me that they had broke up, that they were no longer together. And at that point, I was kind of like, I wasn't going to just go full in and believe everything he said. And I didn't want to come right out and ask anybody, because I didn't want anybody to know that he had contacted me. nothing that would lead me to believe that they were. But I didn't want to believe him. And so I just kept questioning him and just kept saying, you're lying. I know you're still with her. And eventually he told me that he was lying and that he was still with her. But of course he tried to play it off like, well, I'm only with her for the kids. I told you I only went back for the kids. And I just wouldn't have anything to do with him. I mean, I did talk to him. I'm guilty of that. And I admit that years later after the fact. But it wasn't like he was reaching out to me every single day. I mean, he would go 3 or 4 months and I wouldn't hear from him, and then he would text out of the blue, still acting like a fool. And I think this woman is finally starting to come up and admit that people have minds and they can see for themselves the timeline. You know what I mean? And she's acting like the two of them were just fell head over heels in love and run off and got married. But I know firsthand from someone who has firsthand knowledge that he left that woman's house 3 or 4 days prior to posted it all over social media that the two of them were engaged, and living together. So they had to have been seeing each other while he was still living at home, Big, happy, unhappy family, But then again, I have to say, well, as I look back on it, and he was talking to me and telling me that he was not living with her and that they had split up, and I found out later that that was not true. But I talked to him for probably 2 months before we ever really even went out or anything. But I don't want to judge this woman too harshly and say, well, she was a homewrecker and a cheater, because she couldn't have wrecked his home, because his home was not. He was wrecking his home himself. He wrecked his home for 2 decades, So he has nobody can blame her for that. He did that himself. And she was probably so love-bombed and just believed everything that he said, to the point, like I did, that she just believed that he was unhappy and that she was saving him, But anyway, I didn't mean to get started talking about all this and dragging all this out, but this is just for those of you who maybe have trouble coming to terms with someone in your life who is a narcissist, and you might see the same behaviors and the same behaviors in yourself as I, exhibited, or that any one of these other women exhibited. So, I know people are like, well, you're just stuck on it. You're just stuck on it. Well, if my telling this story and my telling how he treated me and these other women as well helps one person out there to figure out that the person that they're with is really not that great of a person, then, if it helps somebody, then so be it. Y'all, thanks for listening. I'm sorry to drag this video out so long. Have a good Monday.